10, and look at that. He hurdles his way into the
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Shanalytics 34. It's me and Vinny again. Of course, we were supposed to do this Monday, but because of me, we're doing it today. But honestly, I'm happy to do this on Tuesday because we got a little more update, we got a little more clarity, and I'll just say this, with the short turnaround this week, and we'll get right into the Titans game here in a minute, but with this short turnaround and everything that's going on in the NFL. Not gonna lie, I was getting a little nervous there about this game happening on Thursday night, but the 49ers seem to have good luck right now with staying healthy, staying safe.
Yeah.
Of course, we don't want to talk about COVID, but it's just affecting the NFL in a crazy way right now that really, this week more than any other week. I know fantasy playoffs have been screwed up. Things are getting crazy. The NFL is putting on 2 games at 7 o'clock or Eastern time today, which that doesn't make sense to me. But anyways, I don't want to get into NFL scheduling. I'm here with my guy, Vinny Saglambeni. Make sure you go follow him on Twitter if you haven't already. Go subscribe to him on YouTube. And drop a like on this video if you don't mind. And you know what? Leave us some comments. We'll try and get to questions throughout. I'm sure you guys will have them. But I want to start here, Vinny. It's Tuesday. It's 2 o'clock Eastern my time. We're about a little over 48 hours away from this Titans game. Some news on the Titans side. First of all, A.J. Brown activated off IR. His practice window is opened. I'll say this. I'm not quite so sure he's actually going to play this week. I wouldn't be surprised if he did, because quite honestly, the Titans really need him, and they could really use him in this sort of game, right? But coming off the injury that he's coming off and the fact that the Titans have spaced this out in this way, it certainly seems like they're planning on not having A.J. Brown for this game against the 49ers. So I believe it's that. We have Elijah Mitchell, who, even though the 49ers didn't practice yesterday at all, they took a rest day, right? It was reported that he would not have practice if they were practicing, and I believe there was one other player too. And for the most part, the 49ers are healthy, right? And considering looking around the rest of the league, the 49ers, they're very healthy right now, really. Of course, you're missing someone like Jason Verrett right now, but really it feels like the main 2 starters you're missing are Emmanuel Moseley and Elijah Mitchell, right? Besides that, 49ers pretty much have every starter that they haven't lost to a season-long injury, right? So heading into this game, how did you feel about this matchup beforehand, heading into maybe a few weeks out, and going into the season? And today, sitting here 48 hours-ish from the game. How are you feeling now? Because I'm feeling a little different than I was.
Yeah, I think I'm feeling different in the sense that, not in terms of, how I feel about, I think in both situations, this game feels like a scheduled loss in the sense that they played on Sunday, you're asking a team to go fly cross country on a short week. That's just to the East Coast. And that's just something it's so hard to do. And a few weeks ago, I felt a little more comfortable then, just in the sense that was closer to when Derrick Henry's injury was announced, and we didn't know what kind of impact that would have. But looking on it now, the Titans are still first in their division, and then they're still competing, and they're still playing at a high level. So,
and they need these wins. The Titans are by no means won their division yet or anything like that. No, the Titans need every game they can get, just like most teams in the NFL right now.
Yeah, and the Niners are the same kind of thing as well at this point to kind of help. Now it helps getting that win against Atlanta. So now, if you were to get a 7 seed, you're ahead of 3 teams now that would be fighting for that, right? You're ahead of Philly, you're ahead of Minnesota, and you're ahead of Atlanta now after that win. But moving forward, I think, you talked about, Elijah Mitchell and Emmanuel Mosley. Azeez Al-Shaair is also out. I don't think he'll be playing. But, I mean, if they were able to play, I don't think you rush it either way. And I think you save them for that next game against Houston so that they can get back into the flow of everything. Because, like I mentioned, not to say that the 49ers are, going to lose this game, but, it seems like everything would be against them. And I think it would be a very telling thing about this team if they were to win this game. It's just hard, logistically to ask for a team to fly cross country and play on a short week. Nevertheless, against a team like the Titans, who are, very well coached with, Mike Vrabel, and they still got Ryan Tannehill, and they're still able to, have the success there. That defense actually isn't awful now.
Their defense
which is the problem that like they had last year.
Yeah.
And they're still finding ways to, get points and, get wins. So this is by no means going to be an easy game. If the 49ers are to come out on top in this game, it's a very telling sign of where this team is and, where they'll be, maybe not officially locked into a playoff spot, but very telling in the sense that, not many teams will want to face this 49ers team in the playoffs.
No, and while the rest of the NFC is falling apart, I mean, 49ers are playing well at the right time. They're healthy at the right time. In terms of timing, right now, I will say is about as confident as I've felt about the 49ers at any point this season.
Yeah.
And that's not because they beat the Falcons. That's because the Arizona Cardinals are reeling. The Tampa Bay Bucks, who I thought would be the toughest matchup, are sure. I still don't think it's an easy matchup, but certainly Chris Godwin being out for the year helps if you do match up against them. The only team I'm still terrified of is Green Bay. And I think no matter what, playing in Lambeau, which it looks like even if the 49ers win the division, they're going to have to play there if they want to get to this.
Yeah, and they play them well. And I know it was week 3, but that was one of their better games that they played at that time.
Absolutely.
And I think that's very telling of that. And again, it's week 3, and things changed from week 3 to now week 16. This is week 16, right?
16.
There's 18 weeks now. So I think that's something that you should still note, though. Like
Absolutely.
that's something that they played really well against, and we'll wait for playoff logistics until it actually happens and everything like that. But yeah, I agree with you, Ben. I don't want to get anywhere near Green Bay, and I don't even honestly want to get near the Tampa either. Just I don't know. Something's just doesn't feel. I don't feel comfortable playing against Tom Brady in a playoff setting.
And that defense too is a terrible matchup for the 49ers.
Yeah,
exactly. To me, that's defensively in terms of the 49ers offense. That's the toughest matchup I see in the playoffs.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's funny to think too. Like I've been saying, like, the team that I would want in theory to play in that first game, I think it would be Arizona. And that's crazy to say, just in the sense that, they beat them twice this year. And
I would say Arizona or Dallas, because I know people bring up Arizona, and I know.
Yeah.
And with Dallas, I guess it's more, while I feel Dallas is a better team than Arizona, stylistically, I feel like the 49ers might have a decent chance against the Cowboys just because Dak isn't playing at that level that he was early in the season, right? And if he's not that guy that he was, weeks 1 through 7 or whatever it was, it's definitely a lot easier matchup, although I don't think any of these matchups in particular make you feel really good about the 49ers' chances. So it's a little pick your poison, right?
Yeah, a little bit. And like with Dallas in particular, like, I just don't know with our corner situation, man. I don't against CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, and Michael Gallup. I just don't know. Like, whereas at least with Arizona, you probably won't be facing DeAndre Hopkins, which I think will help a ton. Now, Kyler Murray will be back, and that's kind of problems of your own that you would have to face.
And he'll be healthier. That's the thing right now.
Exactly.
He is not. I don't care what people say. I don't think he's 100% healthy.
Yeah, and with Arizona in particular too, A lot of playoff games are determined by coaching.
Absolutely.
And you look at the other teams. Let's just look at the NFC in particular, because the Super Bowl. I mean, the Super Bowl. We're not. I mean, that's just one game that you're playing against another conference, right? So let's look at each team. Like if we were to end today, right? Green Bay, LaFleur made it to the NFC Championship game. I think every year.
Yeah, 13-3, both years. NFC Championship game, both years.
Right. So that's the Packers there. Bruce Arians just won a Super Bowl. Mike McCarthy's won a Super Bowl.
Yeah, Mike McCarthy.
No, but that's something.
I know.
Yeah,
I know. He's
and
definitely a lot more qualified than Cliff Kingsbury.
Yeah, Sean McVay's coached in the Super Bowl.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Kyle Shanahan's coached in the Super Bowl. Ron Rivera's coached in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Well, who does that leave? That leaves Cliff Kingsbury, who has not coached in a playoff game before yet. So, that's just something that, and whereas Kyle Shanahan coached in the Super Bowl before. Now, Cliff Kingsbury may have his number this year, but in that playoff setting, I think that's where the 49ers would have their advantage in that coaching department. And, also, I had a point, but I forgot about it. Yeah, that's where you have that advantage there, and
it's hard to beat a team.
Yeah, exactly. That's what my point was, and it's hard to beat a team 3 times in a year.
And I'll say this about the playoff picture: I feel so much better about playing Arizona than I did 2 weeks ago, because I really do believe a lot of the NFL is momentum, and I'll say this for the 49ers. This is the best positive momentum they've had maybe all season. So if they can continue this and end the season 2-1 or 3-0, I certainly think this will be a very confident team heading into the playoffs, given their past success. And one of the most, confident players recently, one of the really one of the reasons the 49ers have been winning the five of the last 6. It's because of this guy. It's because QB1, Jimmy Garoppolo. And I want to give him a lot of praise right now, because although you will see some interesting tweets on my timeline about Jimmy Garoppolo, I promise you they're not negative. I'm just trying to illustrate how some of the analytics and such maybe paint a different picture than what we think. But when you watch Jimmy Garoppolo play over these last 6 games, I won't say it's the best football he's played as a 49er, but I think it's been the most consistent in that he is really limiting his turnover-worthy plays, right? I think that was the big problem with Garoppolo that we've always had, right? He has stretches where he does have the mistakes, right? But recently, he's limited the mistakes, and when he does have the mistakes, he tends to respond well and go on good drives. I mean, just look at that Cincinnati game. The script for me completely flipped in overtime with Jimmy, right? And if that overtime didn't happen like that, wow, would people be talking differently about this guy right now? But they shouldn't be, because with Jimmy, you're going to get some good and you're going to get some bad as well. It's just a matter of being able to limit that within the confines of the offense. And really what the 49ers have done so well recently is allowed their playmakers to make plays, right? Yeah. I mean, just I go back to Cincinnati, that Brandon Ayuk last second touchdown to win the game. Obviously, that's not Jimmy doesn't make that play, but they were in that position because of good throws Jimmy made all overtime, right? The Juwan Jennings throw, the drop in the bucket to George Kittle, that should have been a catch if it wasn't broken up. They're really good plays by Jimmy. Even this last game, I mean, he was just excellent efficiency-wise. And look, the Falcons' defense is literally the worst defense in the NFL. Let's just be clear about that. But if Jimmy continues to do this over the next 3 games, and he's not the reason why they lose in the playoffs, this is a hell of a season by Jimmy, and I think it's about as good as it gets with him, right? And I'm not trying to knock him by any means, but what I'm saying is that the 49ers know exactly what they want to accomplish with Jimmy Garoppolo. They know exactly how much they want to ask of him. And when you ask more of that, things don't usually go his way. And more often than not, they don't, at least. I mean, really, the only recent example where he has thrown, many times in a game and it's been successful for the 49ers is that Cincinnati game. And like I was saying, Vinny, script completely flips because of that overtime, right? So with Jimmy for the rest of the season, I think he's been playing good. Just has to stay efficient. And
Yeah.
again, just limit the turnover worthy plays. That's always been my biggest thing with Jimmy Garoppolo, is that he does everything else pretty well, but when you take into account how many turnover worthy plays he was having early in the season, it didn't make the efficiency as worthwhile because he was diminishing it. Right now, instead of putting his team in a bad position, he's doing just enough to keep them out of harm's way and allow his playmakers to do what they do best, which is run after the catch and get those yak yards. So I just feel like, the run game is working. He's doing well. He's doing exactly what he needs to do. And he shouldn't be doing anything more than that, right? You just don't want to ask Jimmy to throw more than 30 times a game. It's not an ideal game plan for the 49ers. So, for the rest of the season, if game flow dictates their way, Jimmy Garoppolo should look good in a lot of these games, at least until the playoffs. I really believe so. Like, I don't think there's any excuse for him to have a bad game in these last three, because realistically, the only team you fear on defense is the Rams, right? On the rest of the 49ers schedule. That's going to be a week 18 game, and it's either going to be completely locked up or they'll be battling for that last wild card spot. So we'll see how that goes, certainly. But
Yeah.
Jimmy Garoppolo's just been really good recently, and I won't say this is the best of Jimmy, but this is exactly what you want out of Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah, and from John Lynch said it this morning, he's doing what we're asking him to do, and we're asking him to run this offense. And I think, as much criticism as he's gotten, not just this past year early in the season, but in this past, years in this time in Santa Clara, you got to give him his flowers when he deserves it. And he's been playing really well and playing at a high level, honestly, these last few games. And I think, again, like you mentioned, it was against the worst defense in the NFL. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to put up 30 points against
this
defense.
This past game is really the only game that I felt like was what we saw from the 2019 Niners, where they just absolutely, crushed teams' hopes. They didn't just beat teams, but they put the beat down on
and
teams,
the Falcons in general too. Like they stink. Like I'm sorry. Like
they have the fourth worst point differential in the NFL. The Lions have a better point differential. I think the only three teams worse are the Jaguars, the Texans, and I'm forgetting the last team, but it's not a great list.
And I knew it. Like when you have 4 plays to get 1 yard, and you can't get that, especially when you start that drive on inside I think it was inside the 10. That was the very first drive where Jermichael Hasty fumbled the kick return. They didn't score on that. Like that's when like your team is just not good. And the 49ers took advantage of that, and the defense showed up that day. And going back to Garoppolo a little bit, he's making those throws that he needs to make, and he's not putting. We haven't seen like the quote unquote Jimmy throw as recently. I mean, we didn't see that last game. We did see one against the Bengals, which could have been a pick 6, but we didn't see that last game. And I think that's, I know that may not sound like a good thing in the sense that, it's one game where he didn't throw a pick, right? But that's something that you can take and something that you can, build off of for sure going into, what are going to be very important games. Because if you win out here, you're 11-6, and you're potentially, say it falls, like it crumbles for Arizona, right?
Yeah.
And you beat the Rams, you're potentially looking at a division, which I don't think at one point, maybe not at any point throughout the year, we were expecting this team to win this division.
Man, like 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, we would have been like, no way,
Exactly.
No way. But now the 49ers are moving in the right direction. Quite honestly, too, this is the part of their schedule where they should be winning these types of games, right? I feel like the biggest indictment on the 49ers this season is themselves, and the fact that in the first 6 weeks, 7 weeks of the season, they just weren't clicking, and the offense didn't have an identity. They didn't have rhythm, and at times on defense they were bad, but overall this defense is not what's been hurting this team this year. This defense has been good to excellent all year for the 49ers. Now, I'm not going to say they're a top 5 defense, but considering what they're doing right now, they're easily top 10 in my
Yeah,
opinion.
they're top 10. They're top 10
Yeah.
for sure.
So when you take that into account and you look at the volatility of the offense throughout the rest of the season, right? It makes sense that when you look at the stretch and Jimmy is having less turnover-worthy plays, right? He's limiting the amount of attempts he has. They're getting the run game going. Everything works off the run game, works off the run after the catch, works off the yak, right? So when everything else like that is going right, it allows Jimmy Garoppolo more of a leash, right? To not have necessarily mistakes, but he can get away with some throws that maybe he wasn't quite getting away with earlier in the regular season. And I'll say this, I think if you look at Jimmy Garoppolo since week 8, I know his statistics have been incredible. And the EPA, oh my God, he's one of the greatest of all time. But really what's happening is that all the components of the 49ers offense are working really well, right? Like I said, the run game is working well. The weapons are working well. The offensive line, even though in pass protection the right side is suspect, is working well. So when you have all the pieces collectively working well around Jimmy Garoppolo, this is how he should be playing. This is exactly who he is. He's a quarterback that if you put him on, I always think about a guy like Derek Carr, right? I would much prefer to have Derek Carr over Jimmy Garoppolo on my team right now. And I think it's because if you put Jimmy Garoppolo in the Raiders situation right now, I'm sorry, that team is nowhere near a 500 football team. That team is just an utter disaster, right?
Yeah.
So not to get too off topic, but with Jimmy, he's doing everything that he needs to do, and he's not doing more than he should, right? That's the main thing is when he is comfortable, when he is rolling, you don't want him to go outside the confines of the offense because when that does happen, things don't go well usually. And, just I do want to talk about this for a second with a stat like EPA that you'll see cited so often, and it's not just by that one person. There are many people who love to cite that stat. That is not an individual player statistic. I'm sorry. It just
No.
isn't. EPA, if you actually understand how some of these advanced models work and you study some of these things, that's what I have to be honest about this. This is what I study at college. I know Vish is really great with this stuff too. He does computer science. My minor is data analytics. My major is in information technology. So I'm not going to pretend like I understand it as much as the people who are making the models, but at least at a surface level, I can understand what they're trying to accomplish. And when you look at EPA overall as a statistic, it's a great measurement of offensive scheme and offensive efficiency, but it's not a great metric for individual player efficiency because it just doesn't take into account all the individual factors, right? Because when an offense is rolling the way it has been for the 49ers these past 8 weeks, it's going to inflate someone like Jimmy Garoppolo's EPA so high because there aren't many plays where he's taking points away, right? But that's not necessarily because of what Jimmy Garoppolo is doing. Like I've been saying, if you look at the 49ers offense week 1 through 7 versus week 8 through 15, the difference is not Jimmy Garoppolo. The difference is the team around him. And that is not a knock on Jimmy Garoppolo. It's just who he is, the quarterback he is, and the fact that the team around him and the scheme around him is elevating him and elevating the rest of the team, right? He's just not someone who's going to elevate the players around him. It's just not who he is. But what he can do is work within the confines in the offense well enough to keep it so efficient that you don't, because when you don't lean on him and you don't ask him to throw 30, 40 times a game, it goes really well because then you allow his playmakers and the best players on the 49ers to be their offense, right? One thing I've heard recently is that, or heard someone say, is that Jimmy Garoppolo is the centerpiece of the 49ers offense. He just is not. The centerpiece of the 49ers offense is run game efficiency and yak. It's about a ton of yak. And, while Jimmy Garoppolo does rate well in air yards per attempt, I think he's like 8th in the league right now. If you look at actual total air yards on the year, he's like 20th, man. And that's because when you limit the amount of attempts you're getting from him, it just works so much better. And they need to rely on that yak. And you know what? We've held off talking about these guys long enough. So let's just talk about the players who have been killing it for the 49ers. Let's talk about the yak bros. Kittle, Debo, Ayuk. What they've been doing on this recent stretch, specifically getting Ayuk involved how they have, is so impressive. Obviously, George Kittle is reestablishing himself as tight end one in the league. Coming off that injury, since he's gotten off IR and he's been playing, he's been either the best tight end in the league or the second best. I mean, really, he has been so excellent for this team. And then with Debo, he's still killing it like he has been all season. And I'll say this, Vinny, the one guy who I've really seen, I don't want to say change, but the one thing I've seen that's been different is Brandon Ayuk, and the fact that he was getting open early in the season. But what I feel like he wasn't doing was being the best team player for the 49ers, right? He was missing some blocks here and there. He just wasn't executing to the level that they wanted. He had that play earlier in the season where he lined up in the wrong spot. Now, if you look at what they're doing and how they've been doing it, they trust Brandon Ayuk. And not only do they trust him in the pass game, they trust him in the run game. And he's been excellent in run blocking. And to me, when you add that to how open he's been all season, it's just a great recipe for success for him. So, shout out to Brandon Ayuk, because I don't know what was going on early in this season. I'm still a little mystified, but his run blocking has been really something else in these last 7 to 8 weeks. And to me, it feels like a big reason why they do trust him so much more, because when you hear Kyle talk about these players, he wants the complete game from them, right? If you're going to be a receiver, you need to block. You need to be willing to get dirty. And not that he wasn't willing to do that early in the season, but he just wasn't doing it necessarily. Now, gosh, it just feels like with how these weapons have been playing, with how the run game's been going, he's been a huge part of that.
Yeah, and I think there was one play where, like, there've been a couple of plays over these last few weeks where he's putting some good blocks on some guys, and like not just putting them on their butt, but they're getting, the defense are getting frustrated as well with those blocks, and that's where you can see that. And also, like, looking at these guys in general, each are kind of like having their own like respective game over these past few weeks. Obviously, Ayuk, which I would say was kind of more of last week with that
the game-winning play, man.
But even Kittle had a great game in that Cincinnati game, but he went off on the in the Seattle game, 9 receptions, 181 yards, 2 tutties. But then you look at Debo, who's kind of just been that like consistent force throughout the whole year, kind of keeping everything ticking. And Garoppolo's role in that is just, he's not elevating the players per se, but he's putting the players in the best position to use their strengths and use their
he's allowing them to get the most out of these weapons right now.
Yeah, exactly. He's kind of being like I don't know, like he's like that. He's kind of being the Draymond Green in a way of this 49ers team, in the sense that he's kind of he's a little bit of that kind of glue guy in a way to get everyone else in those strong positions and doing it in his own way. I don't know if he's as good. Maybe that's not a good comparison.
What? I'll compare him to a quarterback in the NFL, and I tweeted about this yesterday, and I'll explain it a little bit.
Oh, I know.
He's Carson. He's like diet Carson Wentz, in the idea that Carson Wentz is more physically talented, but I think Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't get enough credit for being as physically talented as people might think he might be. I think he's kind of underrated as a thrower, if anything. But what's similar between both these players is that the offense doesn't want to have to rely on them to make these big time plays. They'll make plays when they have to, but that's within the confines of the offense and the game plan, right? It's not outside of structure. Now, Carson Wentz can do things outside of structure, but that's not what the Colts want him to do necessarily. They don't want to have to rely on that, right? If that happens, it's okay. But really, with both these players, the team, the coach, the offense wants them to operate within the confines of it and execute it the best way, and not push more than that. Because when you do push more than that, those players tend to make mistakes because you ask them to do it so often. Mistakes are just going to happen at some point. So, while the Colts don't have the same receiving weapons that the 49ers have, if they did have the same, if they had a great tight end and another good receiver in the running game, they do, it'd be a very similar game plan to the 49ers. It'd be almost identical. So I think for Jimmy, with these weapons. Things have been working well, and like I said, stay within the confines of the offense and allow the playmakers to be the playmakers, right?
Yeah.
That's what's been happening, and it's
And
just been excellent
yeah,
for
and I
football.
think credit goes to Kyle Shanahan as well for getting a decent
Yeah,
balance of, everyone, because I think there was one point in the year where maybe we thought and that like he had too much to deal with and he was forcing it to Debo a lot.
well,
And
and you're
but
getting Mohamed Sanu in the game plan, like Travis Benjamin was getting catches
you're
early in the
just
year.
but you've found it seems like they haven't just like found like these guys, but I
Yep,
think they found their wide receiver 3 now in
yep, and let's
Jawan
bring him
Jennings.
right up, man. Let's
And
talk
I
about
think you
my
can
guy,
yeah.
Jawan Jennings,
Yeah, he's just been phenomenal, I think, over these past few games,
man.
making big time catches. There was a big catch that he made in Cincinnati. It was a back shoulder throw. Like that's that tells a lot about, not just the work he's putting in, but the trust that Kyle Shanahan has in him to
Absolutely.
make that throw. And honestly, the confidence that he has in Jimmy to make that throw, because I haven't seen much back shoulder throws from Jimmy this past season
No.
or this season rather. And I think it's just credit to that. You can see the menace that he is in the run blocking game. There was the Jacksonville game where he
Man,
caused someone to, get ejected just because he was, frustrating him. And
and Jawan
Kyle
is
was,
he's a big dude. Like,
yeah.
he is big.
And he's using like typically with like Yak, especially with the 49ers, a lot of it is like related to speed. He's doing it in a different way in terms of like just being able to break tackles and
Oh, yeah.
not go down on that first hit. And I think you
He's just
know
so physical at the catch point.
yeah
That's the impressive thing with him so far. He's physical at the catch point. He's physical in the run game. He's physical with his routes. This is just a very like he's a player who understands exactly how he needs to use his body and how to maximize the gifts that he has.
yeah. And I don't think he's KB level yet,
No,
because I think KB was like that perfect wide receiver 3 that they could have. And you
he
see
was a
some
great third down receiver, and
yeah
Jawan
and
Jennings just hasn't done stuff like
yeah
that yet.
yeah and yeah, and you see some similarities between the two in terms of
Oh
like
yeah.
their route running and
Their demeanor also, like, I'll say this, I don't feel like Debo is necessarily that fun-loving, eccentric guy. Ayuk is certainly kind of like a softer individual. Jawan Jennings, if anything, seems like that Kendrick Bourne sort of personality that has been missing from this 49ers wide receiver room.
yeah. And I it's funny because I've been saying for years too, like I've been wanting just a want that I've wanted from the 49ers receiver room is just like a big guy jump ball that you can just go up and get it. And like there was one point where like I was even like it was after he had a pretty decent year. Like his name was Kelvin Benjamin. Like that was a guy that I was like looking
Oh,
at that
I
I'm
know
like,
Kelvin Benjamin,
oh
man. I
yeah.
know Kelvin Benjamin,
He went to
trust
Florida
me.
State. Yeah, he went to Florida State.
Yeah,
Yeah.
game-winning play against
Yeah, so,
Auburn,
like, I
man.
was like, "Okay, I want that guy on the 49ers. I want someone like that, like, just to go up and go get balls at the
Hey,
point of
and if the
attack where."
49ers could go get, could draft the original Kelvin Benjamin, that'd be great. Unfortunately, he's just eating
Yeah,
himself out
but
of the NFL at this rate.
yeah, but then now they have that guy in,
Right.
potentially in Jawan Jennings, and I
I
think
I think
you
they have that guy. Like I really think considering the cost efficiency and the fact that he's an exclusive rights free agent in the offseason, this is a guy who should be on the 49ers at least until 2023, and he should be a big contributor. And if they get any injury at one of those two wide receivers, this is the guy they should rely on. He is a
yeah, and I
consistent
think
player when you give him the ball.
yeah, and I think you can see that now with
Yeah.
the, calls that he's getting and, you can see that trust that Kyle Shanahan has in him to be willing to get those passes in those big moments. Because even at the time when he scored that touchdown in the Falcons game, that was a pretty big point in that game. And that kind of allowed you to kind of
Yeah.
open it up a little bit. So, credit to Jawan Jennings. And I think he's one of those guys like, similar to Kendrick Bourne, that's like really earned his spot in
Absolutely.
this team. And like
Eh,
you feel, and like you mentioned, Ben, you feel if Debo or Brandon Ayuk were to go down, you feel comfortable putting in this guy
Absolutely.
and doing those kinds of
Like
things.
you're not happy if either of those guys go down
No.
necessarily, obviously. But if you have to rely on Juwan Jennings for a 2-3 game stretch where he's your number 2 wide receiver, number 3 pass catcher, I'm certainly very comfortable with that.
Yeah.
I'm not worrying about that as much as I worry about it in another position if the 49ers lose that sort of guy. And Juwan Jennings, to me, like you said, he's just a classic, just a guy who a development guy, right? You've really seen it from him where he had the skills and the tool set to really work within the 49ers offense. And now that he's getting the opportunity and they're calling his name, he's making the most of it. And you got to love that.
Exactly.
Yeah. And, I'll bring this up right now before we get into our defensive topics. And we're not going to stay too much longer on here, but I do want to talk about this before we get out of here briefly. The 49ers should not keep Jimmy Garoppolo, even if he wins the Super Bowl next year or this year. Now, the reason I'm saying that is largely because if you look at the 49ers premium players who they're going to have on contract for the next 1 to 3 seasons from 2022 to 2024, you want to talk about big contracts. Let's talk about Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, Deebo Samuel, Trent Williams, right? George Kittle. 49ers don't really have that much of an inexpensive team anymore. And a lot of the players that they were relying on before when Jimmy Garoppolo has been so expensive and have been cheap and they've been getting the most out of those players, they're just not going to get that in these next couple of years. And the reason they have to move on from Jimmy Garoppolo is because if they don't, their team is seriously going to suffer because they hang on to him. And you want to talk about, we'll talk about Arden Key here in a minute, but let's talk about 4 players, right? Laken Tomlinson, Arden Key, DJ Jones, K'Wan Williams, Jaquiski Tartt too. All free agents this offseason, Vinny. All guys you have to bring back. And while, a lot of those guys are probably cheap, those numbers add up. So if you even want to keep the parts of the team that you like, you have to get rid of Jimmy Garoppolo this offseason. And unless you're willing to sacrifice all 5 of those players and potentially more players or, not re-signing Debo this offseason, like there's a lot that the 49ers would be sacrificing by hanging on to Jimmy Garoppolo. And while it hasn't been as bad this year and everyone said it would be the end of the world, the pandemic is pretty much the only reason that it wasn't the end of the world. The pandemic shrunk the cap, and it made it so that it was beneficial for players to get 1-year deals on cheap deals and return to a team like the 49ers, right? Whereas in other years, you look at all those free agents they had, it just wouldn't have worked. Yeah. So now with the cap going up, it just doesn't work financially. Yeah, and with how much they've invested in Trey, what are we doing, man?
Yeah, logistically, I think it just doesn't really make sense to keep him. I just think, with like you mentioned with the trade that they made for Trey Lance and, Bosa probably asking potentially for Jimmy's contract.
Bosa and Debo are getting paid this offseason.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to pay them this offseason, you're going to have to pay them even more the offseason after. So just pick your poison.
So it just logistically makes more sense for them. And, looking at the on the field stuff as well, like logistically, it's just like there's a reason why they made this trade.
Yes.
And, they're not only saving money by getting off of Garoppolo's contract, but they're saving money in the money that they're paying Trey Lance currently as
Absolutely.
Well. And I think that's a very important, note to take into consideration when they made this trade, because now you look at these next few years, like you mentioned, you can pay the guys. There's options now where you don't really have to necessarily have to worry about who you want to bring back. You have more flexibility with getting
the
those
main
guys.
Thing.
Yeah.
You're potentially losing players by hanging on to Jimmy Garoppolo, right? What everyone's not talking about to me is the reason that the 49ers did this, beyond all the football reasons with Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo, is because they have so many premium players that they can't afford to pay Jimmy Garoppolo even $20 million a year, let alone 27, right? So when you just add up the numbers and look at all the premium contracts that they're going to have in the 2022, 2023 seasons, they'd be making their team worse like on purpose by hanging on to Jimmy Garoppolo. It just doesn't work. I think they got lucky with the timing of the pandemic this offseason to where they could bring back a lot of those players on 1-year deals, the vet sort of deals. That's just not going to work in 2022. It just
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah, and it's not just with keeping the players that you want to have or that are already on your team. It's having more flexibility to get,
Absolutely.
build from outside of the team as well, not just next year, but also, on those years where Trey Lance has that lower number on his cap hit, right? So maybe look into like a guy like a JC Jackson next year to just shore up that corner room. Maybe, it gives you more flexibility to I know you traded a lot of your capital away to get Trey Lance in particular, just your first round picks, but you still have those, second and third round picks that you can maybe use to get, another guy and be willing to pay him through that avenue. So it's just with Garoppolo off the books and Trey Lance on the books, there's a lot of flexibility that you have to really kind of build this team that you can really, make a push for that Super Bowl,
Absolutely.
For multiple years, especially when they have guys like George
Fred
Kittle
Warner, Trent
Williams. They'll probably give Jimmy Ward another contract.
They should,
right?
Yeah.
Or they should at least, right? So it just gives them a lot of flexibility, and that's where I think it'll be interesting to see if they were to somehow win the Super Bowl this year, and you're in this similar dilemma.
I mean, hey, for the 49ers, in their minds, that's best case scenario.
And maybe he comes back, but on a lower number. And I don't know. I just think it's just so hard to ask anyone in general, just in their life, to take a pay cut. Like, that's just like, I just don't think that's just like, it's hard to do, especially with
Garoppolo. The only way he does that is if he wants to be a 49er, that's why he would do that, because there's no other reason.
Other than that, you're asking, he's getting paid what, 27 right now? You're asking what would it be around like at least a $10 million, maybe probably more pay cut.
What you could do is you could make it a 2-year, $30 million deal, or
that's a $12 million pay cut. And now that I know it's like greedy to think, like he's still getting paid, $12 million compared to the 20s, you're losing $12 million, like 15, $12 million that you'd be originally making. And that's a lot for, he's still like going to be fine everything like that. He's making $12 million, but that's still like
but
putting that in perspective of other jobs. That's still a lot.
Yeah, if he were on another football team, he would have practically no reason to take this pay cut, right? And that's the thing I wanted to get to with this issue, and we'll end on the defense here in a second and talk about D'Amico Ryans and Arden Key. But with Jimmy's contract and everything that they've structured, right, they're losing time, or they're losing cap dollars the longer they hang on to Jimmy Garoppolo. In fact, they lost money this season because of him. So you just can't continue to do that. That's unsustainable, considering how many premium players the 49ers have on these contracts. And really, Vinny, you mentioned them making their team better. I'm not even quite so sure if that's I'm just not sure if that's an option anymore, because really what the reason for getting rid of Jimmy Garoppolo after this offseason is that you want to be able to keep those guys that are already on your roster that, honestly, if you keep Jimmy around, you're not going to be able to keep all those guys, right? That's the way I see it, is that the 49ers, by trying to keep the elite players they have, had to get a cheaper quarterback. There's just no other way around it. Otherwise, they were just going to have to trade one of those really premium players who they're going to have to pay a premium price for. And if they had gotten rid of Jimmy this offseason and had gone in with Trey Lance, they would probably have a chance to make their team better. In fact, they could have structured it a very specific way, but everyone wants to talk about the Chiefs and the Patrick Mahomes and, they're doing it exactly like them. No, they aren't, because the Chiefs structured their entire cap around the idea of Patrick Mahomes. The 49ers are not doing that. They have not planned that out well enough. And really what they're doing is they're going to be able to change out the quarterback and keep the team around him that they have now by inserting Trey Lance and taking out Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't even know if they can make their team better after they spend all that money. Honestly, I just don't think they'll be able to. So right now, what you're paying for, would you be if you kept Jimmy around? You would essentially be paying him to make your team worse next season. It's just there's no way around it, unfortunately, and that's the issue with Jimmy Garoppolo. It's all logistics. Aside from the play, like just the play is one thing. You can have any opinion about that. Certainly, a lot of people have varying opinions, but when you really take into account the logistics, it's just too tough, man. It's just not going to happen. And let's talk about the defense. And you know what? I'm going to bring up Jimmy Ward and Jaquiski Tart because they've been excellent.
Yes, please. They have been phenomenal.
But let's also give a shout out to Arden Key, man.
Exactly.
First of all, shout out Bay Area Baller because he's been all over this all off season. But the 49ers have figured out how to implement Arden Key in a really meaningful way that they can create pressure with him, get interior pressure, and move him around in a way where they actually have 4 good defensive linemen on a given series, right? You can play DJ Jones, Armstead, Key, and Bosa, and really move around those other 3 guys besides Bosa, right, on a given play and given situation. And they've been just doing so well with that. I just wanted to mention that. Arden Key's been awesome. I hope they re-sign him. I think he is much better than Kerry Hyder. I have no question about that.
I think so, yeah.
But Jimmy Ward and Jaquiski Tart, people want to talk about how bad the secondary is and how awful Josh Norman is and how bad Ambry Thomas is. And I don't think they've been as bad as people say online. I'm not saying they're very good by any means. The reason that the 49ers passing game and coverage hasn't fallen apart is because of these 2 guys, right? Where are they? They're right there. Jimmy Ward and Jaquiski Tart are superstars for the 49ers. And the fact that they're getting these guys at such a cost-effective price, credit to the 49ers, right? Because we think about all these guys, Jaquiski Tart, K'Wan Williams, DJ Jones, they bring back these guys, and everyone's like, oh, these guys get hurt all the time. Oh, you hear all this nonsense. What I'll say about that issue is that 49ers pay those guys based on that price, right? They pay for injured players knowing that they're going to miss 3 to 4 to maybe 6 games this season.
Yeah, it's relative.
Yeah, but guess what? For what you're paying for those guys, who freaking cares if Jaquiski Tart misses 5 games? You're paying them like less than $1 million this year. TJ Jones, K'Wan Williams, you're paying those guys less than $5-6 million collectively. So you look at Samson Ebukam, who costs $5.5 million per year, or $4.5, right? He's good. He's healthy, right? And he played well last week, but dang, with Jimmy Ward and Jaquiski Tart and what you're getting out of them at this price, this is the only reason your secondary doesn't look as trash as people think it is, right?
Yeah, because I think if one of those guys, I mean, we've seen when one of those guys are out, that's when it. Really,
when Jimmy Ward's out, it's the end of the world.
And even when Tart was out, when you saw Fungo playing a little more, you saw them be a little more, deceptive in a way.
I mean, well, you saw the big play that Huff led up against the Cardinals. I mean, there are those big plays that he just can't. He just doesn't have the speed and the talent that Jaquiski Tart does, right? He just doesn't.
Yeah, definitely. And these guys, I thought Tart was the player of the game last week. I thought he was just phenomenal making plays. He had that big 4th down, 3rd down stop. He had a couple other big tackles that he was making.
I thought he was the player of the game for them.
I thought he was too. I thought he was just absolutely phenomenal, and you could see that there. And like you mentioned, it just gives that stability. And I know Ambry Thomas has been getting a lot of slack recently, and
he's been getting cooked, man. There's just no way around it.
It's just, and with that though, I think he's in it's some of the problems that I think I'm seeing from it is similar to some of from Akello. Yes, I think some of it. I think there were a couple plays where he's actually not he's going stride for stride with these guys and he's looking, but it's just the ball location problems that I think you saw from Akello, which I think could be potentially fixed. But I like that they're I know they're kind of forcing their hand with it, with Emmanuel Mosley not being playing out there, but I think these are all very good reps for Ambry Thomas to have, and I think could we see him potentially be better? Maybe. Maybe he's just not good. We don't know. Like
Yeah, if he doesn't improve from this point, he shouldn't be an NFL player.
well, because
Like
I think he's been improving like subtly, but
subtly, sure.
it's just like,
But
he's
he's
still
been
there's
such
still
a
like 1 or 2 plays like where he's getting mossed and
that Pitts play in specific where he literally gave the ball back to Kyle Pitts. They're just
and it's
he's
some
just
of it too. Some of
he's
it
too
too. I
much of
think,
a liability, right?
yeah, and
now.
it's
It's
too. Some of it
unfortunate.
too. I think it's just some like it feels like I'm not like Croc. I'm not as good as like knowing corners as he is, obviously.
But hey, the reason Ambry Thomas isn't getting cooked as much, the reason Josh Norman isn't getting cooked as much is because of these guys right here.
Exactly.
Give Jaquaski Tart and Jimmy Ward their freaking credit because they deserve it more than anyone else on this defense. And I feel like this is the most underrated part of this defense by far and away. They are one of the best
100%.
safety tandems in the NFL. No question about that for me.
Yeah, and with Thomas too, there was another play. I think some of like the potential drawbacks to him is just potentially his lack of awareness. Because I think there was a play where he could have potentially had a pick, but it looked like he thought the guy was going to catch the ball in front of him, but it kind of just like it was a very open opportunity for him to get a pick. Again, I don't know. I'm not a corner. I'm not as good as evaluating those kinds of things as Croc, but like that's just something that I saw, and I think
I hope we get to see Diamador Lenore a little bit more because
maybe we'll see him more in the slot. I don't know, but
yeah, well, and that's the thing is that they want him to be a slot guy, but honestly, with how great K1 has been, it's just too hard to justify. So I'd at least like to see them try him at outside corner. Maybe in one of these next, or maybe in one of these last 2 games where hopefully it doesn't matter as much. You're playing the Texans, and maybe you're playing a lesser Rams team, right? That's the situation. Give Lenore and Ambry Thomas just let them play, man, because we at least need to understand where they're at going into next season.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I think we're gonna end here today, guys. But I'll say this: Vinny and I, we're gonna get back into the swing of things. We've been a little off and on. Definitely want to get back next week after this Titans game. And you know what, Vinny? Maybe we try and do some different stuff with the people, some Twitter spaces, something else. We'll definitely stay in touch and figure something out.
We're busy, man. We have school.
Oh, yeah. School is priority number 1. But it's a good time to be a 49ers fan. I hope everyone's been enjoying this run because you see how Arizona and Tampa are going right now. Things can change like that in the NFL.
Yeah,
so
and it's been like pretty civil 49ers Twitter recently, which is a little different than the off season and earlier in the season. So
the Shanahan stuff 6 weeks ago.
See, it just shows how much like winning masks everything. And I think it's a credit to the players, but obviously the coaching. And I think the coaching's been on top of it these past few weeks.
And you know what? We'll end on this. Shout out to Miko Ryans. You are a freaking baller, future head coach. Sooner rather than later, even, honestly. You're not even 3 years away. I think he should at least get interviews this offseason. I hope he does. So enjoy that, 49ers fans. Enjoy this. This stretch of football has been fun, even though obviously COVID's been screwing everything up. Having this many games in this many days.
Credit to the Niners too for keeping the COVID numbers low.
Absolutely. Hey, COVID numbers low. Their injury, like in terms of,
I don't think they've had any. Knock on wood, they haven't had any COVID cases yet.
Yeah, in season, I know early they had K1 or Mosley, but I mean that was training camp. So in season, 49ers have been fine. They're healthy. They've been following all the right protocols. They've been extra careful, but hey, things are, you have to be good. You have to be lucky. And the 49ers are doing both right now. So credit to them. And they deserve a lot of it.
And quick shout out to Nick Mullins for almost beating the Raiders again yesterday.
Man, I was bummed out. That sucks. That sucks. But he had his moment and he deserved that. He certainly did.
Definitely.
So enjoy this Titans game, everyone. Enjoy 2 football games tonight in like 4 hours because of course. But happy holidays, everyone. We'll be back next week. sometime. We'll try and figure out some time. It's going to be a little different with the schedule, but we'll certainly get back to you guys. Watch out on Twitter for us. And thanks for sticking around. We appreciate your time, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Peace out. Happy holidays, everyone.
Peace.